Hello, and welcome to the next episode of the GFS Wellbeing Podcast. For today's episode, we have a very special guest today, Mr. George Peterkin, who will be enriching us on the topic of mental well-being. So can we all please give a warm welcome to Mr. George, who will be answering today's beautiful questions.
George Peterkin, I'm Managing Director of Mind Your Health. We're a company that has an office in Surrey and an office now in Dubai. I was a teacher for many years before I retrained as a counsellor and primarily work with young people, be it through art therapy, play and music therapy, or just that kind of general, quote, normal therapy as well.
What motivates or inspires your commitment to the field of mental health, and why is promoting mental well-being important to you on a personal level?
So when I was a teacher, we had pretty much incidents every day of the week, because I worked in the boarding house as well, of children and young people struggling, but also my colleagues. Alongside that, I also played a high level of sport, in particular football, and for me growing up, the whole idea of mental health as a concept was really negative. The only time I thought of it as a positive was those kind of top range athletes, the ones that really achieved their goals. And so in terms of motivating or inspiring, I left a course once as a teacher. I attended mental health first aid myself 10 years or so ago, and there wasn't really a eureka moment, but it was obviously just that day, everything that was spoken about just made sense to me. And I just left there thinking, why wasn't I told this growing up? You know, why was this thing never spoken about? Why is it that we only ever spoke about it in terms of as a consequence of someone who was really struggling? And so from there, I just thought, well, you know what, this is something I would like to do more of. I like to think I'm quite a good teacher. And so I thought, well, let's put two and two together. And a bit like a snowball going down a mountain, it just kind of took momentum. And I love my quotes. I think it makes me sound wise, but one of the best quotes I always liked was by most boxers say it: the best laid plans end after the first punch has landed. So I was really committed at the very beginning. This is what I want to do. I want to train my colleagues up. I want to train all the students up at my school. And then it got to the stage of where other schools were asking, oh, can George pop by? And then after that first punch, as it were, it's come to where we are now 5 years later. In terms of promoting mental health and mental well-being on a personal level, we've all got mental health. This whole idea, and we retrain people to be counsellors and whatnot. We don't need to be perfect ourselves. We are perfectly imperfect after all. But it was this whole idea of that, realising if I want to help others, I have to help myself first. It's not selfish, it's selfless. And on a personal level, the longer this company and business has gone on, and my commitment to promoting mental health and well-being to schools and organisations, the more powerful it's become for me to look after myself in all of this as well, because as we all know, you can't pour from an empty cup.
Can you share stories or instances that have made you more certain about why it's really important to focus on mental health, either in your own life or when helping people with their mental well-being?
So I remember one time when I was playing at a football club, without being too full of bravado, quite high level. Hundreds of people would come and watch us every week. Minimum, as it were. I remember one of my teammates suddenly stopping in the middle of a game and just standing there kind of with that kind of 1,000-yard stare, and then he just sat down on the middle of this pitch during a game and just burst into tears. And for us, 22 men on a pitch, the coaches, the people watching in the stands, obviously something you don't see often. This is going to show my age. In fact, the only time I remember something like this happening was in Italia 90 with Paul Gascoigne crying for England because he was going to miss the final. And I remember a few days later we had a professional come in before training. We all sat in the changing room and this person came in, and it was a sports psychologist. And he was talking to us about, what had been occurring for our teammates, what we could be doing, some early steps to not just to promote, good mental health and have really high level performances in the future, but what we can do to kind of prevent us having these kind of moments where we struggle so much that we're not even able to even say out loud, I need help. And that's kind of just the first story of just many for me. I'm youngish, we'll put it that way, but I'm a male from Britain, born in the early 90s. We were raised on this whole idea of that men don't talk about their feelings. And I think that's always come to my mind in particular, that when I've had my male friends in the past talk to me about their struggles in my early 20s, I didn't know how to respond to it without using jokes, what we call banter, or just kind of very British, kind of stiff upper lip, come on, get on with it. And then being a teacher working in an all-boys school, you're suddenly seeing things differently. These boys who you're working with every day, you realise that they're children, they're human beings. They haven't really been defined yet by that kind of masculinity, what it means to be a man. And again, going back to that first answer, practice what we preach. So all of my stories really come from this whole idea of me not being able to support others appropriately growing up, and realising that actually the skill sets I could use to support people are actually really simple and straightforward. But yeah, that instant at that football club really opened my eyes, and there were so many of us listening to that story, listening to what this sports psychologist was telling us, and so many of us were thinking, that's not what men go through. And yet the evidence was there. Well, that is what men go through. And we needed to acknowledge that as a group, collective. That was maybe 11 years ago, and I go to lots of clubs now, football clubs. I'm working with the rugby union, which is quite well known for its alpha male, for better use of another expression. And you can't get enough chairs basically for all the men that want to attend the training now. So, what happened 11 years ago, I'm not saying wouldn't happen now, but the response would be very, very different because we do talk about it as a collective.
Are there any effective strategies or activities teenagers can incorporate into their daily routines to promote positive well-being?
So in terms of strategies and activities, because of the way I work therapeutically, and that's quite a snobby way to start, I believe more often than not that instead of taking things away, we add positive things first. We add proactively to our routines and whatnot, rather than straight away saying, well, that's obviously not good for you, let's take it away completely. So for example, perhaps nutrition's always a big one. Nutrition is a massive part of our lives. I'll just say this now, there's no such thing as healthy and unhealthy foods. In terms of the healthy ones are all the fruit and veg, and the unhealthy are the cakes, the ice creams, the biscuits. They're just foods. It's the quantity, the timing, and the amount of things that we have, which during the week, which make them healthy or unhealthy. So for example, if nutrition is something we're a bit struggling with, and we know this for a fact with teenagers, I'm sorry to say there's too much processed food, too much blood sugar rushes and whatnot. Adults go through it as well, by the way, but we're here to talk about teenagers. Rather than me say to you, stop having ice cream, stop having these things that you always enjoy, let's be proactive and say, what can we add to your nutritional lifestyle first? Not so much to compensate or to balance, but just simply to add some things which are better for your brain, your blood sugar. So for example, you're about to go into your exam. What's the worst thing you could eat before an exam? Definitely sugar, high processed stuff, because you have that blood crash. What could we add? Some protein. Why? Because what does protein do? It calms your hunger levels, it neutralizes your blood sugar levels, it satiates you, it makes you feel full. So during the exam, you're not thinking halfway through, gosh, I could really do with another biscuit, because your blood sugar's balanced. So a big thing for me is nutrition. One of the other things is social media. It is screen time, and everybody's going to be listening thinking, ugh. I'm not one of those that says that we should not be using social media and not be having screen time, because myself and any adult, any teacher would be very much hypocrites. Because why? We have emails on our phones, we have LinkedIn, we have social media. We're not that old. We do all these things, but everything in balance. Screen time is also linked to sleep. Every kid that listens to this is gonna roll their eyes and all of this, but sleep is one of the sleep deprivation in particular is one of the biggest impacts on our well-being. In fact, I know this seems quite strong. Sleep deprivation is literally the first form of torture. In war, spies, whatever, they get captured, they'll deprive them of sleep first, because when we're tired, we make mistakes. Think about in sport. tennis rallies. Tennis rallies are very, very short at the end of a match. Why? Because we're tired. This shows my age again. There was a very famous team that won everything growing up, Manchester United. They always scored in the last 10 minutes. Why? Because they were fitter and stronger. Maybe the refs were on their side, I don't know. But look at sleep. Think about our patterns before we go to bed. What do most of us do? We look at our screens for an hour before we go to bed. What else do? We have caffeine 3 hours before we go to bed. All of these things come into play that has an impact on sleep. If we're tired, we make poor choices the next day. Lastly, for me, in terms of strategies, I'm always a big believer in gratitude, but not feeling grateful. Feeling grateful, for me anyway, kind of has this link to guilt and shame. Having gratitude for the things that we have, the things that we're able to do is fantastic. But my biggest thing for teenagers, when I work with teenagers who are maybe going through, let's say something like depression, which has to be diagnosed, what do they find really hard? They find it really hard to do even the most basic things during the day. So I say, let's find the small wins and let's just find some routine. Here's one from me, and probably the parents are punching the air for this. Really good routine. As soon as you wake up, make your bed. This would be hard because a lot of adults don't do it either. But let's start just by making our bed and just do that every day. It's from a great video by a Navy SEAL commander said this. He says, if you want to have a good day, start by making your bed because you've already done your first task. And if you have a bad day, you come home to an already made bed. But for me, I always say to teenagers, let's get a routine, even if it's just the first 10 minutes of the day. Wake up, try not to check your phone. Because that's really hard for us adults as well, by the way. Try not to check your phone. Have a routine, make your bed, have a shower, have breakfast, then brush your teeth. Don't brush your teeth before breakfast. I dislike it when people do that. Don't get it. Have that routine first, because then you've done your day. I would encourage this, but good luck. What do I do every day? And I try to. Lots of people do it, and we know this is proven for well-being. Have a cold shower. That will wake you up. But in terms of teenagers, this sounds so patronising to me. For me to say. In terms of strategies, one of the biggest ones is just to be a lot kinder to yourselves. Myself and all the teachers, we often look back to when we were teenagers and we had our own struggles, but we also didn't have as much intensity in terms of all of the expectancy and the things that always are almost hitting our brains all the time that you do. So have that time out, switch off, take it easy now and then. Easier said than done. But in terms of the strategies, all of the things I've said, they're not evasive. They're not going to have too much of a negative impact, apart from maybe a cold shower here or there. But in terms of they don't need specialists, they don't need doctors or diagnosis to do. They are really simple things which we all know are good for us. Nutrition, sleep, appropriate screen time, socialising, switching off, hygiene, all of these different things are well within our means. It's actually almost just kind of rolling our sleeves up and saying, hey, I'm going to take control. And even if I just this week make my bed, that's still a win. That's a strategy in place.
How can parents create a supportive environment at home to promote positive mental health for their children?
So in terms of parents, I certainly don't want to make it a us against them. What we often seem to forget from the outside is that parents are human beings too. Parents don't have all the answers, but their role is to guide us when we're children and teenagers, and I would even say as young adults, because we're still developing. But what we often seem to forget is that adults are people too. And I work as a therapist mainly with teenagers and children, but I also have lots of adult clients as well, and they come in with their own difficulties, their own issues, their own things going on. So in terms of parents, I would say to any parents listening, like we say to the teenagers, you've got to be a lot kinder to yourself. You can't get it right all the time. You can't get it wrong all the time. We have this idea in therapy, it's called the Winnicott theory, which is basically subtitled the good enough parent. So long as we get it right 51% of the time, over 25 years, it kind of goes to our advantage. But with adults, and I think most of the adults here would definitely attest to this, we were raised on the do as I say, not as I do motif, which is which is very true. I will say this for parents. There's a lot of the times we don't need to practice what we preach because we are the guardians. But actually, if we want our children to be emotionally intelligent and emotionally aware and able to express how they're feeling, as adults, as parents, we need to reflect on whether we are creating that environment. And lots of parents do come for therapy because they want to be, quote, better parents to their children. And often we talk about, well, what is a better parent? And they say, I want to be able to listen to my child more. I want them to feel that they can come and talk to me about these things. So that's a big thing for me, for parents. What can we be doing? Let's work on ourselves. What's going on for us? We're adults. We're somebody's son or daughter. We're somebody's brother or sister. We have our own fallities. We have our own things going on in our life. But I'd also balance it with this. As adults and as parents, we talk about well-being strategies for our teenagers, for the children in our lives. Why do our teenagers have to do these things by themselves? Why can't we be doing them as a family? Are there things we could be doing together? Are there things that we could be doing individually? That's a really big thing for me, for us as parents, is that it's okay for us to get things wrong, and it's also really important that we also focus on our own well-being as well. This whole idea, again, I go back to, we cannot pour from an empty cup. I have lots of parents come on our training and they're so hard on themselves, almost punishing themselves emotionally whilst they attend the training. And the thing I'm most desperate to do is just put a hand on their shoulder and say, you're doing okay. It's all right. It's okay to get things wrong. On the greater scheme of things, what do parents need to be? They need to be present. They need to be present physically. They need to be present emotionally for their children. If they feel they're not quite there yet, good, acknowledge it. What can we do not better? What can we do differently?
I want to thank Mr. Peterkin for being a part of today's episode and Jason and Armand for having a wonderful session today about men's mental health. And thank you guys as well for listening to today's episode, and make sure to stay tuned for the next exciting one. Remember that we have a lot of figures around school you can always talk to, such as the emotional buddies, the SLT team, and many more. So please make sure to not bottle up all your emotions and speak up. This is Nyasha Vador, your welfare counsel, signing out. Bye.